There are souls that walk among us who carry something different, something that cannot be taught or imitated. They move through the world like shadows cast by a light source no one else can see. Ibn Arabi, the great Sufi mystic and philosopher, spent his life studying the architecture of consciousness, and what he discovered was both beautiful and terrifying. Some souls are not meant for the ordinary passages of human experience. They are rare, dangerously rare. And if you possess such a soul, you already know that your existence feels like a secret you cannot share, a frequency that others cannot hear. The word rare is inadequate. It suggests scarcity, but what we are really talking about is difference in kind, not degree. These souls do not simply experience life more intensely. They experience a different life altogether, one that runs parallel to the visible world like an underground river. Most people live on the surface, unaware of the depths beneath their feet. But you, if you are one of these souls, you have always felt the pull of that current, drawing you downward into territories where light becomes strange and meaning becomes liquid. Ibn Arabi understood that the soul is not a static entity. It is a dynamic process, a becoming, a continuous unfolding of hidden dimensions. He spoke of the perfect human, the one who has realized the fullness of divine potential within human form. But before that realization comes a long journey through darkness, through dissolution, through the terrifying recognition that you are not who you thought you were. The rare soul is the one who has begun this journey, whether they intended to or not. And once begun, there is no turning back. What makes a soul rare is not virtue or intelligence or creativity, though these may be present. What makes it rare is its relationship to reality itself. The rare soul perceives what others filter out. It feels what others have learned to numb. It questions what others accept as given. And this creates a fundamental loneliness, a sense of being exiled from the ordinary world even while standing in the middle of it. You can be surrounded by people and still feel like you are speaking a language they will never understand. The first sign of a rare soul is this. You have always felt like a stranger in the world, not in the adolescent sense of not fitting in, but in a deeper, more ontological sense. It is as if you were born with the memory of another place, another way of being, and earthly life feels like a poorly fitting costume. You watch others move through their days with an ease that baffles you. They seem to know the rules, to accept the script, to find satisfaction in things that leave you empty. And you wonder if there is something wrong with you, if you are broken in some fundamental way. But the truth is more unsettling. You are not broken. You are simply awake in a world that prefers to sleep. Ibn Arabi wrote about the station of bewilderment, a spiritual state in which the seeker loses all familiar reference points. The rare soul lives in perpetual bewilderment. You cannot rest in certainty. Every answer you find immediately births new questions. Every truth you grasp slips through your fingers like water. And while others find this instability frightening, you find it strangely comforting, because you have learned that the only honest response to existence is wonder. The moment you think you understand, you have stopped looking. This strangeness manifests in countless small ways. You find yourself moved by things that others dismiss as trivial, the pattern of shadows on a wall, the specific quality of silence before dawn, the expression in a stranger's eyes as they pass you on the street. And you are left cold by things that others find profound: status, success, the accumulation of possessions and achievements, not because you are superior, but because your soul is tuned to a different frequency. You are listening for something that most people cannot hear. The second sign is that you have an almost unbearable sensitivity to suffering. Not just your own suffering, but the suffering of all beings. You feel the pain of the world like a physical weight pressing against your chest. When you see injustice, when you witness cruelty, when you encounter the casual violence that humans inflict on each other and on the earth, it does not simply anger you or sadden you. It wounds you. It feels personal, as if every act of harm is an attack on something sacred within yourself. This sensitivity is not weakness, though it has often been dismissed as such. It is a form of perception. The rare soul has not yet built the necessary walls between self and other. The boundaries that protect most people from being overwhelmed by the world's pain have never fully formed in you. Or perhaps they formed and then dissolved, eroded by too many encounters with truth. Either way, you are porous, permeable, and this makes ordinary life extraordinarily difficult. Ibn Arabi taught that true compassion is not an emotion but a state of being. It is the recognition that there is no real separation between self and other, that all suffering is ultimately one suffering, all joy one joy. The rare soul experiences this truth viscerally before understanding it intellectually. You do not choose to feel the pain of others, you simply cannot help it. Their wounds are your wounds. Their despair is your despair. And this makes you dangerous to the established order because you cannot be taught to stop caring. You cannot be convinced that some people matter and others do not. This sensitivity extends beyond human suffering. You feel the distress of animals, the violation of nature, the silent screams of things that have been destroyed or discarded. You walk through a city and feel the accumulated sadness of all the dreams that have died there. You enter a room and sense the emotional residue of old conflicts, old griefs, and people think you are too intense, too emotional, too much. But you know that you are not too much. The world has simply become too little, too small, too willing to accept numbness as normalcy. The third sign is that you have experienced profound darkness and emerged changed. Not merely sadness or difficulty, but a real descent into the underworld of the psyche. Perhaps it was depression or trauma, or a dark night of the soul. Perhaps it was a sudden loss that shattered your understanding of reality. Whatever form it took, you were brought to the edge of what you could endure, and something in you broke open. This breaking is essential. Ibn Arabi wrote that the shell must crack before the bird can emerge. The rare soul is forged in darkness, not despite it. The descent into the underworld is not a failure or a detour. It is the path itself. Because it is only in darkness that certain truths become visible. Only in the absence of light do we learn to navigate by other senses. Only when everything familiar is stripped away do we discover what remains. What emerges from this darkness is not the same person who entered it. You cannot go through such an experience and return unchanged. Something has died in you, and something else has been born. And this creates a divide between you and those who have not made that journey. You try to explain what you have seen in the depths, but the words sound hollow. You try to return to your old life, but it no longer fits. You have been initiated into mysteries that cannot be spoken, only lived. The darkness you have known has given you a strange gift, the ability to be present with suffering without trying to fix it or flee from it. You do not offer empty reassurances or toxic positivity. You can sit with someone in their pain because you have sat with your own. You know that healing does not come from avoiding darkness, but from moving through it with consciousness and courage. And this makes you a lighthouse for other lost souls, even when you feel like you are barely finding your own way. The fourth sign is that you see through illusions that others defend with their lives. The social masks, the collective narratives, the agreed-upon fictions that hold society together. You cannot believe in them anymore. Not because you are cynical, but because you have seen beneath them. You understand that most of what people call reality is actually a shared hallucination, a consensus trance maintained by fear and habit. This seeing is both liberation and burden. On one hand, you are free from the need to conform to expectations that you recognize as arbitrary. You do not waste energy trying to impress people or climb hierarchies that you understand to be meaningless. On the other hand, you are isolated by your clarity. When everyone around you is invested in maintaining certain illusions, your refusal to participate feels like betrayal. Your honesty feels like aggression. Your authenticity feels like judgment. Ibn Arabi spoke of the veils that separate humanity from divine reality. Most people live behind countless veils, layer upon layer of conditioning and belief and fear. The rare soul has begun to remove these veils, not through effort, but through a kind of involuntary stripping away. Each illusion that falls reveals a deeper truth and a deeper loneliness. Because the more clearly you see, the fewer people can see with you. You notice how much of human behavior is driven by unconscious fear, the desperate need for approval, the terror of being alone, the compulsion to accumulate and control, the addiction to distraction and comfort. You see these patterns in yourself as well, but you cannot stop seeing them. You cannot return to unconsciousness once consciousness has been awakened, and so You move through a world of sleepwalkers, trying to find others who are awake, knowing how rare they are. The fifth sign is that you experience time differently. For most people, time is linear, predictable, a river flowing in one direction. But for you, time is more like an ocean, with currents that move in multiple directions simultaneously. You have moments of profound presence where the past and future collapse into an eternal now. You have experiences of déjà vu that feel less like repetition and more like recognition, as if you are remembering something that has not yet happened. You sense patterns and cycles that others dismiss as coincidence. This altered relationship with time is disorienting. You cannot always live in the practical, clock-bound reality that modern life demands. You miss appointments because you lose track of hours. You abandon plans because something more important is happening in the invisible realms. You make decisions based on intuitions that you cannot rationally justify, and people judge you as unreliable or flaky, when in truth you are simply responding to a different rhythm. Ibn Arabi taught that the awakened soul exists simultaneously in multiple dimensions. The rare soul has access to this multidimensional awareness, even if only in glimpses. You experience synchronicities that are too precise to be random. You have premonitions that prove accurate. You feel the presence of patterns and forces that operate beyond the visible world. And this gives you a sense of being guided, of participating in a larger story that you cannot fully comprehend but can sometimes sense. This non-linear experience of time also manifests in memory. You remember things that feel more vivid than your current reality. You carry wounds from events that others have forgotten. You feel nostalgia for places you have never been. And sometimes you wonder if you are remembering past lives or parallel lives or possible lives that exist in other dimensions of being. The boundaries between what has happened and what might happen blur in ways that conventional psychology cannot explain. The sixth sign is that you are drawn to the depths of everything. Surface-level conversations bore you to the point of physical discomfort. Small talk feels like a form of violence against your soul. You want to talk about meaning, about death, about love, about consciousness, about the nature of reality. You want to know what people truly feel beneath their social masks. You want to explore the shadow, the forbidden, the taboo. You want to go to the places where language begins to fail and something else takes over. This hunger for depth makes you difficult to be around for people who prefer to stay comfortable. Your questions make them uncomfortable. Your intensity makes them anxious. Your refusal to engage in superficiality feels like rejection, and you learn to edit yourself, to pretend interest in things that mean nothing to you, to participate in the shallow rituals of social bonding. But it exhausts you. It feels like a betrayal of your essential nature. Ibn Arabi wrote that knowledge of God comes through knowledge of the self, and knowledge of the self requires absolute honesty and the courage to descend into one's own depths. The rare soul is naturally suited to this work. You are not afraid of your own darkness. You do not run from complexity or contradiction. You want to understand the full spectrum of your being, even the parts that terrify you. You would rather face hard truths than live in comfortable lies. This orientation toward depth also appears in your creative and intellectual life. You are not satisfied with simple explanations or conventional wisdom. You read philosophy and mysticism and psychology, searching for frameworks that can hold the complexity you perceive. You create art or music or writing that comes from a place beyond your conscious control. You dive into subjects so completely that you lose track of everything else. And people call you obsessive, but you know that this is how you connect with what is real, through total immersion, through surrender to the mystery. The seventh sign is that you feel a profound responsibility to truth. Not the truth of facts or information, but truth in the deeper sense, authenticity, alignment, integrity. You cannot lie without feeling physically ill. You cannot betray your own knowing without experiencing a kind of soul sickness. You cannot participate in systems or relationships that require you to violate your essential nature. And this makes you unemployable, unmarriageable, impossible to categorize or control. This commitment to truth is not self-righteousness. You do not believe you have all the answers. In fact, you are acutely aware of how little you know. But you know that you must be true to whatever understanding you have achieved in each moment. You must speak what you see, even when it would be easier to stay silent. You must act in accordance with your values, even when it costs you. Because the alternative, living in betrayal of your own soul, is unbearable. Ibn Arabi distinguished between the truth that can be spoken and the truth that can only be lived. The rare soul serves this deeper truth, even when it cannot be articulated. You feel it as a pull, a magnetic north that guides your choices. When you are aligned with it, you feel a sense of rightness that transcends happiness. When you betray it, you feel a dissonance that no amount of external success can remedy. And so you learn to trust this inner compass, even when it leads you into difficulty. This dedication to truth makes you dangerous to systems built on lies. You cannot be bought or threatened into silence. You will not repeat the propaganda, perform the expected role, maintain the necessary fiction. And because of this, you are often marginalized, dismissed as idealistic or naive. But you know that the real naivete is believing that we can build a sustainable life on foundations of deception. You know that truth always finds a way to surface, no matter how deeply it has been buried. The eighth and final sign is that you feel called to something you cannot name. There is a sense of destiny, of purpose, of mission that has haunted you since childhood. You do not know what it is exactly. You cannot point to it or describe it clearly. But you feel it, like a distant drumbeat, like a voice calling from somewhere beyond the edge of the known world. And you know that your life is meant to be in service of this calling, whatever it turns out to be. This sense of calling creates a restlessness in you. You cannot settle into ordinary life, cannot be satisfied with the default script of career, marriage, children, retirement, not because these things are wrong, but because they feel like distractions from your real work. And yet you do not know what your real work is. You search for it in different traditions, different practices, different forms of service. You try on various identities and roles, hoping one of them will fit. But nothing quite matches the shape of the calling you feel. Ibn Arabi wrote about the polished mirror of the heart, which reflects divine reality when it has been purified of the accumulated dust of ego and conditioning. The rare soul is being prepared to become such a mirror. The strange experiences, the suffering, the sensitivity, the seeing, all of it is part of the polishing. You are being shaped for a purpose that you cannot yet comprehend, and the not knowing is part of the process. The uncertainty is part of the preparation. This calling often isolates you further, because you cannot explain it to others. When people ask what you want to do with your life, you cannot give them a satisfactory answer. You speak in abstractions about transformation, about service, about consciousness, and they look at you with polite confusion. They want you to name a career, a role, a concrete goal. But you cannot, because what you are called to is not a doing but a being, not a position but a quality of presence. And yet, despite all the difficulty, despite all the loneliness and confusion and pain, there is something in you that would not trade this rare soul for a normal one, because you have tasted something that most people never taste. You have seen something that most people never see. You have touched a depth of reality that makes the surface world seem like a shadow play. And once you have known that depth, you cannot forget it. You cannot go back. You can only go forward deeper, further into the mystery. The rare soul lives in a state of creative tension between the known and unknown, the visible and invisible, the personal and transpersonal. You are stretched between worlds, belonging fully to neither but touching both. And this stretching is painful. It would be so much easier to choose one world or the other, to fully embrace the material life and forget the spiritual calling, or to fully renounce the world and retreat into solitary practice. But you cannot do either. You are being asked to hold both, to live at the intersection, to be a bridge between dimensions. Ibn Arabi understood this tension intimately. He lived in the world, married, worked, engaged with society, while simultaneously dwelling in mystical states that took him beyond all earthly concerns. He taught that the highest realization is not escape from the world, but the recognition of divine presence within the world. The rare soul is learning this lesson, slowly and painfully, learning to see the sacred in the ordinary, learning to honor the human while reaching for the transcendent, learning to be fully alive in both dimensions simultaneously. This dual citizenship creates a unique form of suffering. You feel the pain of earthly existence more acutely because you know it is not all there is. You feel the pull of spiritual reality more strongly because you are still bound to physical form. You cannot rest in either realm. You are always aware of what is missing, what is lacking, what could be. And this awareness keeps you moving, searching, evolving, even when you would prefer to stop and rest. The rare soul is often misunderstood as being aloof or detached, but this is not accurate. You are not detached, you are differently attached. You care deeply about things that others have forgotten how to care about. You love fiercely, but your love includes the recognition of impermanence and the acceptance of mystery. You engage with life fully, but always with one foot in eternity. You give yourself completely, knowing that nothing can be possessed or held. This way of being requires tremendous courage. It would be easier to numb yourself, to conform, to accept the limitations of conventional consciousness. It would be easier to dismiss your perceptions as imagination, your sensitivity as weakness, your calling as delusion. But you cannot. Something in you refuses to settle for less than truth, even when truth is uncomfortable or inconvenient. Something in you insists on staying awake, even when sleep would be more comfortable. There are moments when the weight of this rare soul feels unbearable. When you look around at a world that seems determined to destroy itself, at people who refuse to wake up, at systems built on cruelty and greed, when you feel the gulf between what is and what could be, when you wonder if your sensitivity, your seeing, your commitment to truth makes any difference at all, when you feel like you are shouting into a void, like no one is listening, like you are utterly alone in your perception. In these moments, remember Ibn Arabi's teaching. The soul's journey is not about reaching a destination, but about becoming a vessel for divine manifestation. You are not here to fix the world or save everyone, or even to fully understand your purpose. You are here to be what you are, a rare soul, a frequency that most people cannot hear, but some desperately need. Your very existence is your contribution. Your refusal to compromise your essence is your resistance. Your commitment to truth in a world of lies is your service. The rare soul is not better than other souls. It is simply different, tuned to a different set of frequencies, responsive to a different set of imperatives. And the world needs both, the souls that can navigate the surface world with ease, and the souls that dive into the depths and return with treasures that cannot be found anywhere else. Without the rare souls, humanity would lose access to dimensions of being that are essential to wholeness. Without the mystical perception, the artistic vision, the philosophical inquiry, the spiritual longing, we would become purely mechanical, purely functional, purely surface. But the rare soul pays a price for its gifts, and that price is primarily loneliness, the loneliness of seeing what others cannot see, feeling what others have learned not to feel, knowing what others do not want to know. It is the loneliness of being awake in a world that rewards sleep, the loneliness of speaking a language that few can understand, the loneliness of carrying a light that attracts some and repels others, that comforts some and threatens others. Ibn Arabi wrote that the mystic walks a path between fear and hope, never resting fully in either state. The rare soul embodies this paradox. You fear that you will never find others like yourself, that you will spend your entire life in exile from genuine connection. And yet you hope, against all evidence, against all odds, that you are not alone, that there are others out there who